Hi everybody, here we are again. So let's look into this Upadeṣa-undiyar Verses 1 and 2. Verse 1 says, "Can karma be God, since karma is insentient, jaḍa? Karma giving fruit is by the ordainment of God, the Ordainer, kārta. Kārta means one who does. So God is the actual doer. Karma is just mechanical, it's insentient. So how can karma be God? Even the scientists admit that action, or physics, or whatever they want to call their idea of God, is just mechanical and insentient. If that's so, why can't they calculate when a particular atom of radium, let's say, is going to break down? According to quantum mechanics, they can calculate this particular radioactive substance is going to break down at a certain rate. It's called a half-life. After a certain amount of time, half of the atoms will have broken down. But they cannot predict when any individual atom is going to break down. Why is that? Because there is sentience involved. God, the absolute, the supreme, is the kārta, he's the doer. He's not insentient, and he's in charge of karma. So even though one can predict, at least to some extent, what the karmic outcome of a given action is going to be, one cannot predict when and how it's going to manifest. And this is the limit of the knowledge available through the karma system. The karma-kandas in the forest were following a philosophy called Pūrva-karma, Pūrva-mīmāṁṣā. Pūrva-mīmāṁṣā. Purva means previous, previously, in the past. Mima means action, and aṁsa means a limb or an instrument. So what they're really doing is saying that the past becomes the causes of the action in the present. And certainly that's true, but as I pointed out, the extent to which one can understand this action is very limited. And there's also another problem. Who is the actor? See? Who is the person creating the cause? And who is the person receiving the effect? If you have to exist as a person, either to be a cause or receiver of an effect, then you are bound to the wheel of law of karma. You are bound to birth and death, rebirth, and so on, to have to receive the effects of your previous causes. And so, to gain release, one has to become a non-doer, neither the cause nor the receiver of the effect. And there are two ways to do that. I got another letter from my unsolicited advisor, the same one I talked about in the introduction. And he's telling me, you have a good intellectual grasp of this subject, but you're really, your ego doesn't want to give up its job. Your intellect doesn't want to just give up. So you should just stop doing everything. Well, nice try. But I'm not going to stop making these videos because that's just what happens. I can't help myself. So anyway, there are two ways to attain this non-doership. And I would say they're the via positiva and the via negativa. I'll talk about the via negativa first because that's the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha's teaching brings you to the point where you realize there is no ego. There is no person. What we call I, quote unquote, is actually just a speculation. It's just a layer of conceptions which we put over our experience. I described before the Mula-pariyaya Sutta, how the Buddha taught that whenever we get an impression, whenever we get a sense perception coming in through the senses, then immediately the mind goes to work to create this conception of I and mine. So I see the beautiful view out the window. Now, I haven't done anything to create this view. It's just there, right? But what do? Immediately, we put the layer of I and mine and go, oh, I have such a beautiful view out my window. You know, come on, people. There is no such thing as I. It's just a thought. It's just a word, actually, that we add to everything, isn't it? Like some people have to put salt on everything. Others have to put sugar on everything. So, in the same way, every thought that comes in, we add this I, or we add mine to it. And then we try to enjoy it as an extension of our so-called self. But that's not the real self. That's a fictitious self that we speculate, that we create. So actually, it's not possible for me to just sit in a room and not do videos. Because I'm not doing the videos. That's what people don't understand who have no experience with actual self-realization. That actually, it doesn't stop action. To be self-realized simply erases the doer. And things are still going on. Ramana Maharshi is still going in the kitchen and cutting vegetables. He's still giving interviews 20 hours a day to whoever showed up. But he's not doing anything. Well, he is not. So how can he do anything? There's another beautiful sutra by the Buddha where he's talking about being free from karma. And someone is saying, well, how can you be free from the effects of your previous actions? Because the karma is actually in one's own mind. And I'll explain this in a minute. So the Buddha says, well, imagine the sunlight coming through the window of a hut. Now, where does the sunlight land? Say it's just after sunrise and the sun is low in the sky. The sunlight is coming in through the window. Where does it land? So the inquirer says, on the opposite wall of the hut. And the Buddha says, well, what if we remove the wall? And he says, well, I guess then the sun would land on the ground. And the Buddha says, well, what if we remove the ground? And he says, well, I guess the sun would land on the ocean. And the Buddha says, well, what if there's no ocean? The guy had to admit, well, I guess it wouldn't land, would it? So removing the opposite wall of the hut is like removing the ego, the sense of I. And removing the ground is like removing the mind, the speculative function that creates the ego, on which the ego stands. And removing even the ocean would be to remove the perception of material world entirely in samadhi. And that's the other way. If removing the ego is the negative way, then the positive way is expressed by Ramana Maharshi. I found just the perfect quote just a couple of minutes ago. He says, Being still is not an effortless state of indolence, like my friend would like me to get into. All mundane activities, which are ordinarily called effort, are performed with the aid of a portion of the mind and with frequent breaks. But the act of communion with the self, or remaining still inwardly, is intense activity which is performed with the entire mind and without a break. Maya, which cannot be destroyed by any other act, is completely destroyed by this intense activity which is called silence. Why is it silence? Because there's no trace of I anywhere. If we follow the mind back to its root, if we follow the thought of I to its origin, what we find is silence. That silence can go on even when there's activity. So we find that the people who have attained silence, have attained enlightenment, have attained their true being, are still active. It's not like they just sit there like a stone. No. Stopping activity means either in the negative sense, getting rid of the ego and the mind that creates it, or in the positive sense, by engaging in a total communion with the real self, self with a capital S. And that's a kind of yoga that happens completely within, completely internally. And there doesn't have to be any outside effort associated with that. One does not have to sit in a certain posture or refrain from speaking or breathing, although those can be helps to attain it. Once it's attained and solidly established, it goes on pretty much automatically. And the whole mind is engaged in this communion with the self. So everything that happens is done fully, done totally, done with the whole mind, the whole self. So let's move on to verse 2. The fruits of action, perishing by being experienced in the form of pleasure or pain, become seeds and make one fall into the ocean of action, hence will not give liberation. So how does this work? Okay, if a tree grows up and we take the fruit and we eat it, there's two parts to the fruit. There's the edible part, and then there's the seeds. So if we take the seeds and spit them out and throw them on the ground, then again the trees will grow up and create more fruits. So this is the process of karma. How does it work? Well, everything that happens, everything that we do, and everything that we think or say creates a mental impression. And these impressions are seeds. And what do? They eventually fructify into more actions. And we can't say when they're going to fructify, but they inevitably do. So everything that we do and say and think becomes a seed of further actions in the future. Actually, everything that we do, everything that happens, is simply going by the law of karma. Okay? Because, why? These seeds in the mind become vasanas. Vasanas means tendencies. A tendency towards a certain type of action. A certain type of thinking, speaking, or doing. So everything is going on by these vasanas, these tendencies that were created in a previous life. And they become dormant in the mind, these seeds. And then in the next life they become what we call prarabdha karma. Prarabdha means that which is fructifying. It's not in storage. I mean, people have these weird ideas. like there's some angel up there, keeping track of everybody's karma, writing it in a book or something. Or maybe there's a big granary where all these seeds are stored somewhere in the akasha. No, it happens in our own mind. Our own mind records all of the thoughts, words, and actions that we perform, and that creates a seed of becoming. And then according to the process of paticca-samuppada, which we've gone over 1,000,000 times in these different series, dependent origination, those seeds germinate and grow and fructify. That's it. It's a more or less mechanical process, except for when they will fructify. That no one can predict. Or how exactly it's going to happen, we don't know. Because this world is very complicated, and all these different causes and effects are intertwined, like the roots of different trees coming together, and we don't know exactly how the tree is going to grow. But it will grow, and it will produce the fruits. Now, the problem with that is, because the mind is full of seeds created in the past by our actions, then we have to take birth and we have to produce further actions as a result of those seeds fructifying. So we can't get liberation. We can't get release from this process of karma. So that's the problem with this Pūrva-mīmāṁṣā philosophy that everybody is engaged in today. That it binds them. It binds them to the wheel of birth and death, to the process of karma. These vasanas that we create, these seeds or tendencies to different types of action, are the cause of enjoyment and suffering. But they're also the cause of birth and death, or I should say, death and birth, death and rebirth in the material world. So to get rid of these is the aim of all yoga practice. To dissolve the mind, to dissolve the personality, the sense of I, the sense of doership. It's just like the Buddha said, removing the wall of the hut, removing the ground that it stands on, removing the ocean beneath it all. And this is what we're going to go into in the subsequent verses of this Upadeṣa-undiyar. And we'll see how Ramana reveals the entire process of yoga in just a few verses. So, Namaste, Om Tat Sat, Om Harihi Om.